Hello, everybody, and welcome in. I am so excited to have Lumi here for Connected Conversations this Wednesday. Awesome, and I love your YouTube channel. I already put a shout out for that on there a couple times. So we're really excited to have you here and to learn more about what it is that you do. So please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, and let's get talking.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Scott. My name is Oluwapolumi Kareem. I am a husband, chemist, and a YouTuber. I'm currently actually in my PhD program right now at Tulane University. I'm in my 5th year, about 2 months away from defending, so I'm pretty excited for that. I recently started my YouTube channel back in June of 2020 during the pandemic. Decided to go ahead and get in some work on starting my journey through science communication. So I've been working on that, which has been really exciting. And then I actually got a job, which is awesome as well. Something that's a big hurdle when it comes to graduating with your degree is making sure you have a job afterwards, right? So in June, I'll be starting my new job with a company called BASF. Depending on where you are around the world, you may have heard of them, may have not heard of them, but they're one of the largest chemical companies in the world.
Yeah, we have a Superfund site near my school. Yeah, that they made. Yeah, that's great. So that's great that you already have a job lined up. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know, and on your whole program. So, it's funny. Like I started streaming a lot more when the whole quarantine stuff happened. It sounds like you started your creative ambitions with science communication around the same time. So I think a lot of us kind of like fell into that, and I know I've met lots of great people, including yourself, and there's people in chat, Nikita and Gathwiggle. I mean, you guys are awesome. Thanks for being here, and please get out the questions when you have them. And we'll talk a little bit about your chemistry first. I'm going to be honest. I had to look up what Dendrimer chemistry was. I wasn't sure. I was like, I think it probably, I was like, based on the root, it has something to do with like dendrite, like things going out. So I was like, I don't know. And so I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's close, I guess, but I really had no clue.
Right.
So do you want to talk about what it is that you've been researching?
Sure, yeah, I can. If you don't mind, can I share my screen?
Yep.
Give a little bit of visual aid. I won't get too crazy with the slides here. This. All right, so hopefully you guys can see my screen.
Just got to hold on 1 second.
Not a problem.
And I will get that up. Come on.
So I guess I can just go ahead and keep talking.
Yeah, go ahead and talk.
You can so to Dendrimers, like you kind of had it right, Scott. So Dendrimers are basically tree-shaped molecules. So Dendrimer comes from the Greek word dendron, which basically means tree-like, right? So as you can see probably on the screen or coming up soon, you see 2 images. One on the left is obviously just like a little cartoon image of a tree, and on the right sort of shows how little animation showing how trees sort of grow, how we sort of visualize trees growing. And that's important for kind of understanding exactly what Dendrimer chemistry is. But much like a tree that you're obviously used to seeing, right? A tree usually is made of 3 parts, right? You have your trunk, then you have your branches that come off of said trunk, and you have your leaves at the very ends of it. So just like the tree is made up of 3 different parts, your trunk, your branch, and your leaves, a Dendrimer is very much the same way, where it's made up of 3 sort of parts as well, where we have our trunk, which is what we call our core, and then we have our branches, which are usually made up of We usually call them like little wedges that are made up of different repeating or the same type of small molecule. And then we have our end groups, or what we call our leaves, right? So this is what we have. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But at the end of the day, the idea is that we sort of grow dendrimers just like trees grow, right? You start with a tree and it starts off with a little twig in the ground, and then it grows a little bit more. It may grow a few branches, and then it starts to bear some leaves. And the same way we grow our dendrimers. We start off with our core, we then put on some branches, and then we sort of get the leaves towards the end. And just like with trees, when you have a bunch of different leaves on them, the great thing about dendrimers is that they have a lot of different what we call in chemistry functional groups at the ends of them. So those are sort of like our leaves at the very end of our dendrimer. And the great thing about dendrimers is that we can take advantage of the fact that they have so many leaves on one tree, or so many functional groups on one molecule. And that means they're really, really great for things like drug delivery, for instance. That's sort of the big claim to fame for dendrimers. They're really efficient at being able to deliver drugs. Because the great thing about that is when you have so many different groups on the ends, that means we can attach things onto each one of those. And it means that we can have what's called a high drug loading capacity. So in other words, instead of just attaching, let's say, one thing onto our little vehicle, we can attach, a ton of the same thing, or even different things onto the same vehicle, and sort of get the same overall effect. So the great thing about dendrimers is that they have a high drug loading capacity. They're also like more soluble than a traditional polymer that you may be used to, and things of that nature. So the work that I do is making dendrimers. That's actually really where my work sort of started, was making materials like this. And then I've sort of transitioned a little bit on to something different. So then what I currently work on right now is what I call bis MPa dendrimers. So that's the chemical that my dendrimers are based on. Bis MPa is really nice compound because it's considered to be biodegradable, environmentally friendly, as well as relatively cheap, which is always a good thing when it comes to chemistry. And we're able to basically build these dendrimers using bis MPa. So as you can see on the left-hand side, I have sort of the small one. So this is more like our core or our trunk of our tree. And then we can keep growing outward more and more and more until we get something that's like more on the right side, where we have sort of our fully grown tree or fully grown dendrimer. So each one of those wedges sort of corresponds to what we call a generation. So you can have a G1, which is basically the innermost part or the innermost part of the tree, things that are closest to the trunk. And then they'll sort of go outward. So you can think of like the last generation, or in this case, G3, as being the most outermost leaves of our tree or our dendrimer. So what I've really been working on these last few years is developing a linear version of these dendrimers. You can imagine it's hard to kind of take, if you could imagine taking a single branch from a tree and then just having two leaves on either end. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, is to basically take a branch and make it just as big as a regular tree, but only have two leaves on either end. So that's what I've been working on with developing my linear version, is taking the building blocks that we used to build our dendrimer and make a linear version of that. Because honestly, it's never existed before. And it really allows us to be able to understand what about the dendrimer, or sort of the properties about the dendrimer, what can we attribute of those to the fact that it's branched, or the fact that it's, it's split into multiple different like branches all over the place. What about that is attributed to the fact that it's split that way versus something that's completely linear? And the only way you can really sort of get that real comparison is by having two things that are built from the same building blocks, right? So that's what I'm working on, is making this linear version of our dendrimers and then comparing them to each other and seeing exactly how much of each property is really attributed to the actual shape or architecture of each of those types of models. So yeah, that's sorry, that's a really long.
That's okay. That's it. That's in a nutshell. I got it. I think I understand it. Now, when I first saw it, it just so happened that I had just gone over in my high school general science class, cleaning up oil spills, where we looked at detergents, right, and how they have a hydrophobic end, they have a hydrophilic end, and they encase, the oil droplet, right? And that it kind of looked the same to me, and I think it kind of had that same idea. where you have that central piece and then you have the radiating out from that, and it's still, you're encapsulating something in the middle. Now, am I really far off in thinking that's kind of similar to a dendrimer, or is that just off base?
No. You're completely correct. So the dendrimers are, though they're not as known, I sort of call them sort of the stepchild of polymer chemistry in general. A lot of polymer chemists don't really talk about dendrimers as much. But dendrimers are actually really, really cool, and they've been used for a lot of different purposes. They are actually really, really flexible or adaptable to a lot of different things. So as you're saying in this example, like, there are dendrimers that do have sort of internal cavities. So if I go back up to this this upper side here, right? So you can see that there's sort of, and this is just a drawn schematic, but you can see there's sort of space in between these wedges, right? And you can imagine that you can actually fit things in those spaces. So something that was actually done a few years ago was something called the Meyer box. And basically what they were able to demonstrate was their dendrimer was able to encapsulate smaller molecules, because the environment that's on the inside or towards the trunk of our dendrimer or the core of our dendrimer, the environment there can be very different from the environment that's on the very outside. Right. So if you have something that doesn't like to be in the outside environment and would rather prefer to be in the inside environment, we can actually take dendrimers and they can actually find their way and sort of snake their way into those little spaces, into those internal cavities, and become encapsulated in those areas. So yeah, you can use dendrimers for exactly the same thing, sort of the same ideology.
Right. And I think it's also important to think, and in chemistry in general, sometimes it's hard because just like we're doing here, you're seeing it one-dimensional. These things are three-dimensional, right? They go all around. I mean, your picture they have up there right now just kind of shows a cross-section of one piece of this, right? But it's really a whole sphere often that's being built out, as you said, like one layer at a time. It's kind of like the onion of polymer chemistry.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually.
So that's really neat. And then, yeah, it's kind of like you want to find the difference between what the simplest properties are with that whole thing, so you're not wasting your time going down, barking up the wrong tree, so to speak, right, with your research.
Right, exactly.
And then you can simplify it, save money, save time.
Exactly, right. Dendrimers are, like I was saying before, dendrimers sort of have their claim to fame when it comes to drug delivery, right? But the thing about our group, or what we really would like to do at our group, is to be able to show that dendrimers can be much more useful than just delivering drugs, for instance. But in order for us to be able to figure out all different types of potential applications that these would be useful for, we have to be able to understand how they behave, right? So it's a little bit fundamental in nature, but it's pivotal in order for us to understand what is that we can use this sort of subset of polymer chemistry and take advantage of it more to use for different applications out there.
Right. And again, I've often talked to people on this show about the importance of basic research, which, this seems to fall in that realm where, you're not going for that new drug necessarily, right? You're figuring out the fundamentals, and maybe it will result in drugs down the line, or some environmental chemistry that would be beneficial for society, or who knows, any number of applications, and that's the benefit of some basic research. You don't know where it's going to go.
Exactly, right. It's not until you do it that you start to figure out what the possibilities are. It's not until someone actually spends the time doing sort of those basic things that we start to realize, okay, now we have the building blocks to now do these, sort of more grandiose goals, if you will.
Yep. And so this is your research finding that linear from the whole dendrimer itself. What was it you're going to be doing at BASF? Do you know? Or are they just going to hire you and stick you in a lab and say, go for it?
So probably more like the second option. So I'm joining as part of what's called their LDP program, or Leadership Development Program. It's essentially like a rotational program. So you come into BASF, you'll do a series of rotations in different parts of the company. Usually for me, being in the US, to be at one of their locations, one of their major hubs around the country. and then I'll get some experience working in different areas. So everything from research, or it could be in a more like commercial type setting. So maybe working in things like logistics, or working in terms of like business development. Those kind of things are also options. But I'll do a few rotations with that, and then I get the opportunity to sort of figure out, okay, where is the place in the company that I like the most, or what would I like to do the most, and that kind of sort of takes off from that.
That's pretty cool. That's nice. That's nice. Now, are you still going to be? You're just outside New Orleans, right? That's where you're at right now in that area.
Yeah.
You going to stay there?
No.
Oh.
I've been in New Orleans for almost 10 years now. Wow. It's been a while. It's been a fun journey. I've enjoyed the city and everything, but no, it's going to be probably moving on to somewhere else after this.
All right. If you come to upstate New York, let me know.
That is a possibility. BASF has a huge location up there. Huge hub up there, Terrytown.
Yep. So, well, congratulations to you. Now, your other endeavor, and mine similar, is science communication. We've gotten into that. Tell me about that process. Kind of like, how do you get your ideas? How long does it take you to put together an episode? How much of a strain is it between the creative, process and having, everything else you do in life? How do you balance that out? So just a few questions from one person to another.
Yeah, Scott, you asked some heavy questions there. So science communication, and I can stop sharing my screen. That's gonna mess you up, Scott. Give a heads up on that. I started off in science communication actually shortly after I graduated undergrad, as far as like a full-time gig. So I worked for a company called STEM NOLA, which is a local nonprofit, which is here in New Orleans, or headquartered out of here in New Orleans, where we would do STEM activities with students from K through 12. So when I worked with them full time, I was sort of their event coordinator as well as like project designer. So my job was to sort of come up with the different activities that students would do for those events, and I would sort of plan all those activities. I would source all the materials for those activities, all types of different stuff there. So I started off working in that and I did that for about a year until I started my PhD program at Tulane. So the bug for me has never left. Like I've always been interested in science communication ever since that experience. And I always think about different things that I want to do, things that I want to build, and just sort of, playing into the creative side of myself. And so I spent a lot of time doing that mentally. But when I started grad school, it was sort of difficult to sort of balance the two, right? Mm-hmm. You're sort of starting this new program, you're trying to get, your feet wet with all these classes. When you get to PhD level, they sort of tell you that everything you learn in undergrad doesn't matter because it sort of all goes out the window. It's so oversimplified. So, now you're sort of getting more into the real details of it. So trying to balance that with, again, wanting to be more creative, I sort of had to let those things kind of go for a while. So now that I'm sort of at the point where I'm on the tail end of my PhD, I've gotten a lot better with, balancing things. I'm not taking classes anymore. So it's allowed me a little bit more free time to sort of come up with different ideas. And that's why I decided to go ahead and start my YouTube channel, because it wasn't so much with me just looking at things and saying, oh, this is very interesting. I want to be able to share with other people. And so that's why I went that route. As far as like coming up with different ideas, to be honest, I'm someone who always used to watch things like How It's Made. Those used to be my favorite shows. I was just that kind of kid. So for me, a lot of times it's just from wondering. I don't really have like some people have more of like a defined process as to how they like come up with ideas and all kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm just a thinker. So like even something that I do recently is when I drive in the car, I don't listen to any music. I don't listen to any music or podcasts or I'm not watching anything, driving. I'm watching the road. but other than that, I just turn off everything, and I use this as my time to think. I just literally sit there and just aim my mind, if you will. And I just kind of wonder about different things, and I'll look at stuff that some people may see as being a little bit more maybe mundane, but I sort of think about, okay, how do they work? How is that built? How does someone make that? What goes into manufacturing this sort of product or making this thing tick or whatnot?
Yeah.
And that's sort of how my brain is wired. So I give myself sort of the space to just think. I will sit in the car, I'll sit in the shower, whatever, and I just think about different things. And that's sort of how I come up with my video ideas.
So, can you see the chat? I don't know if you were watching chat or not.
Yeah, I can see the chat.
Okay. All right. There's what you want to non-dairy neutrino had a comment there for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, nice. Awesome. Wow, small world.
Yep. And I think what you're talking about with a lot of people, especially people in science, you kind of have those places where you just kind of think. Well, some people actually like to think listening to music, like you said, the shower are some of the best places for thinking. You're talking about in the car, you're just kind of constantly, wondering, those kinds of questions. And as a teacher, I can kind of, one of the ways I know the kids that are kind of attuned to a STEM field are the ones that ask those annoying questions, right? Which I don't find annoying. I find them great. Just like if you had a kid that was, having to take apart everything, you're like, yeah, you're an engineer. Yeah, you got to find out how it works, don't you? Right. Let's put those curiosities to good use.
Right. Exactly.
And I think if you talk to a lot of people that got into science, they have that background. I know you're talking about watching a whole lot of how it's made. I used to watch a lot of that, but I watched a lot of, I was a biology major. I just watched documentaries when I was a kid. Endless. Like anything in the library, I would watch it. This is before YouTube, so I didn't have much of a choice of what to watch, but, and it really does help, get you thinking, right, about how stuff works. What is this stuff? That's why I like a lot of your videos. It has a simple question that even if you didn't think of that question before, when you hear it, you're like, oh, yeah, how does that do that? Now that you mention it, I want to know. And that's why I like the videos, right? Because it brings you in, because it makes you think something that you didn't even think that you wanted to know about. Wait a minute, what? Cheese doesn't have to be yellow? What?
Right.
And then you get sucked in and you watch it. And I'll also add that there's in education, and when it comes to videos, there's a kind of a pedagogical know-how where for a video, it's 1 minute per grade level. That's how attention goes. So like 8th grade, you don't have them watch a video longer than 8 minutes, right? If it's a 6th grader, you don't have them watch a video longer than 6 minutes, right? Because if it's a good video, that's how long their attention span is. So you're hitting that sweet spot for time. I think sometimes content creators think that they have to make longer videos. No, you just have to make better videos.
Right.
So I don't know if you had that thinking at all when you went into this, or what?
No, 100%. I did. I try as much as possible to sort of feel for the audience. My audience may not necessarily be someone who's super sciencey or someone who's really into the science. They just sort of wonder, if they scroll by and like you were saying before, or they sort of wonder, okay, well, cheese doesn't have to be yellow, or cheese isn't actually yellow, or the cheese that I'm used to buying is actually yellow rather. I want them to sort of stop and think, okay, well, interesting, and they tap on it, but I don't want them to immediately feel like they're lost, one, but also make sure they don't feel like they have to invest so much time into understanding why cheese isn't yellow. I try to make sure that I keep videos relatively short, because I want to make sure that someone who is, or the everyday person, when they stop by, that they can feel that they can understand the material. And the reality of the matter is not everyone can sit down for, a 20-30 minute, discussion on something or really get down to the detail. But I'm here to sort of hit the high points of, okay, here's why, it is, this is the way it is. Here's how it's made. Here's how it's produced. Here's how it's given its color. And here's, sort of the things that you thought were maybe true, but actually aren't true. And just sort of, wrap it in a nice package that's a little bit easier to consume for someone. And, you're someone who's really into the science stuff, then, I'd imagine that you probably would, continue on a little further down the rabbit hole if you will play. For the everyday person, I just want to make sure that it feels like it's sort of bite-sized for them, something they can chew on, digest, and actually remember, and not just feel lost the whole time.
Exactly. And I think that what a lot of science YouTube creators and communicators in general, a lot of times when you're talking about the general public, is not necessarily, you're not aiming it towards those people that are going to go into STEM. But, and I always tell my students that science is important no matter who you are, and it can be interesting and rewarding, to think about it and understand it at whatever level that you're at. You don't have to be a scientist to do science necessarily, on a fundamental level, or enjoy it. And I think you would agree with that as far as like your videos, right? It's not necessarily going to be, for scientists. No, it's for, everybody. It's fun to think.
Right. Exactly. It's funny, Scott, because, your students are sort of the demographic that I'm after, honestly. Yeah. And the reason for that is because, me working with a company like STEM NOLA, I saw something really, really apparent when it comes to, I would say, high school level students. So with that company, we used to do what are called STEM Saturdays. So once a month, we'd go to a local gym, and we would literally transform it into experiment space, or you could even call it like a lab space, for instance, depending on what we're doing that day. And each one of those STEM Saturday events, we had a different topic. We would do anywhere from 2 to 3 activities, and then we would end the day with what's called a build. And that build was, we wanted to make sure that students feel like they could do something, with materials that or sort of everyday materials they could find around the house, and show them that STEM doesn't have to be expensive. STEM doesn't have to be something that's super complicated. You can do experiments and build things and see how things work with just the stuff that you have around you. So we would do those types of builds with the students, and then we would let them take it home. So that was the whole point, was to make sure they're able to build something, put it all together, see it work, and then take it home so they can show their friends. And the response we got from those was amazing, honestly. We had students who were so excited to be able to come in and build something with their hands, know exactly how it works, and then take that home, and they would explain to their friends, and they would come back the next STEM Saturday, and they would say, like, I still remember the one that I had from last Saturday. I remember the car that I built from that, and so on and so forth. So those are super awesome. But one thing that I noticed about our students who would come to these events, they were very, once you start to get to about 8th grade, the drop off was super sharp. We could have an event of 200 students, and 190 of them are K through 8, right? We may have maybe 10 high school students. And so what I wanted to do, and what I aim to do on my channel, is to sort of target that demographic. We have tons and tons of STEM initiatives and outreach that go for kids that are younger age. But I wanted, instead of relying upon students in that demographic to come to us, to show us the interest, or to take the time to apply to these different summer camps and programs and so on and so forth. Let's bring it to them, and that's what I aim to do with this YouTube channel, is to try to bring the science to that demographic and say, like, hey, we care about you guys too. We want to make sure that you guys feel like we also care about you, and we want to encourage you and expose you and show you that it's something that you can do, and it's something that if you're just interested in doing it, you should definitely pursue. So
yep, I think especially as you get through middle school, which I've always said is probably the worst years of your life. It's where you're developing your peers, and your peers mean a lot to you, and establishing that affinity group with other like-minded people. If you're the only person that that's into chemistry or into computers and engineering, it's lonely, and you're not going to have a peer group. Whereas events like you're talking about enable you to expand that affinity group where you can be with others, and thankfully there are more clubs now than there were now. I know when I was in high school, there, you know, most schools have robotics clubs and Odyssey of the Mind and computer clubs, and you know, I run an esports program. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that, you know, kids can get into now that can foster that affinity group, so you're not alone. Because, you know, it can be a lonely place when you're, even though geeks and nerds are popular people now, sometimes it's just in words only, you know. It can be tough being 13. Oof.
Definitely.
You know, and you know, I see that drop off, and there is no easy answer for it. There really isn't. It's not easy. It takes a community to kind of do that. And I my hope is, you know, that's why we're on Twitch, because that's a younger generation. You know, you're gonna find a lot of kids on Twitch versus you'll find them on YouTube too, of course. But you know, there's certain, you know, I don't know. I feel there's certain things we can do as educators in general to help foster learning in kids, and that it's ubiquitous and people do it. You know, it is. And there's nothing wrong with being curious and asking questions. It's normal. It's what humans do, actually. We ask questions.
Right. Exactly. I want to. You know, I hope to make sure that like someone.
Yeah. Hey, Pemberton, thanks for the follow. Give me a follow there. Thank you. And RSS, give a follow as well. Thank you. You know, a funny story. You're talking about kids like taking stuff home. I often have kids, you know, in class will be doing an experiment. Less so this year, unfortunately. And we would do something cool, like we would do elephant toothpaste, or you know, something cool. And they'd be like, "Oh, can I, you know, post this on my Instagram or my Snapchat?" I'm like, take out your phones. You want to show the world science? Like, please do. Snap it out to everybody. You know, and show your parents what you're learning in science class, please, and then tell them come to vote for the school budget next week. You know, thank you for the bits there, Nikita. That's appreciated. And but then there's other teachers. Now I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, you know, that are like, put away your phones, don't take your phone out in class, how dare you. I'm like, you're missing one of the best opportunities for these kids to learn. Like you're saying, they take it home, and then guess what, they explain what they did to like one relative. All right, they're relearning it again, right? Then they explain it to a friend, right? They're learning it again, right? Every time they explain what they did to somebody else, it gets a little bit more solidified in their brain, right? And then they go back again, right? And then they learn something else, right? Same thing. I would hope if they take a picture of something and be like, "Oh, what was that picture you snapped out?" Or whatever. "Oh yeah, that was science. We were, you know, it was called elephant toothpaste. It was really cool." You know, if nothing else, they said it was really cool. You know, it's not what you learn; it's what you felt, right? So
Exactly.
You know, if you felt, you know, empowered and you felt curious and you had fun, that's, I think, in middle school more important than the content in a lot of ways. But okay, there's my rant. I'm done for now. I go on my educator rants, but
no, it's a good rant. It's a very true statement.
All right, so you had mentioned when we were you know, messaging or whatever, that you're looking into sustainability as kind of a piece of what you're going to be getting into on your YouTube channel. What do you got planned?
Yeah, so you know, something as scientists, right? We're very accustomed to seeing sort of a how do I want to put it? Sort of a maybe a little bit of a conflict when it comes to the way things are marketed versus the way that things actually are, right? So one thing that I really wanted to explore was sort of this idea of, you know, sustainability, and really within that, the idea of biodegradability. You know, and a lot of things are out there, and a lot of companies like to advertise different products and say, you know, this is friendly, this is what's called, this is sustainable. We want to become carbon neutral, or, some cases, some people even say they want to become carbon negative. And I feel like there are a lot of these very, these buzzwords out there that people are sort of latching onto. And I wanted to sort of explore what those actually mean. What does it mean for something to actually be biodegradable? What does it mean for something to be carbon neutral, carbon negative? And even with that, how much of that is actually true? Sometimes, as chemists, we can sometimes get into trouble where we start saying, what is biodegradable and what's not. Because a lot of times when you look at certain studies, they will say that a material, and I apologize if there's a car alarm going off right now in the background. But this is apartment living, right? But a lot of times what you find out in some studies is that, people will say something's degradable and they'll just say, oh, yes, it's degraded. It's no longer what it originally was. And that is true. But a lot of studies don't actually go on to see, okay, what did it degrade into? And the things that it degraded into, how would those affect the environment? And how those affect the local ecosystems. So that's really what I want to sort of explore, exactly what these terms actually are, and then also really get down to the root of it. What does it mean to actually be biodegradable, and what is the intended source? Who is going to be doing the degrading? We sort of say it's biodegradable, throw it out there, and then it just kind of goes away, right? We don't really think about it very much after that. So I want to sort of explore more of those topics in the future.
Yeah, that's great. And I one thing that now we've talked about in my class recently is, but the other thing about the advertising is the natural, right? You have a natural product. When often the synthetic is, it's exactly the same thing and it's better for the environment, right? So, that's another place where it's kind of, you can look into that a little bit. It's just on the surface, if it's all natural, it sounds good. I tell my students, I'm like, arsenic can be all natural as well. I can have some foxglove, that's all natural, but you don't want to eat it,
Right.
So it's, yeah, exactly. Uranium is all natural. Doesn't mean it's good for you. Exactly. I mentioned that as well. I'm like, you don't want to be walking around with the all natural uranium. So, so yeah, I think a lot of those selling points, especially as they advertise more and more, and then something else is that water use as well. You can be, carbon neutral, but when we talk about plastics in particular, about how much water is used, the old paper bag versus the plastic bag, argument, which one uses more water, which one's biodegradable, which one's not, blah, 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 and, you can have full-on debates with people, about that. And that's happened in many a town, city, and state government, I am sure. Are you going to get into some of those debates? Those like water bottle versus, disposable bottles, and, cloth diaper versus, disposable diaper, all that stuff?
I mean, very much so. I mean, the sort of the three pillars, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle. And a lot of people, tend to jump to the recycle part, but there's two terms in front of that for a reason. And the biggest one is reduce, and that's something that I think we have to change our behavior as humans to retrain ourselves to be able to not use as much. That's sort of the biggest player in all of this, is just not needing as much, not needing as much material, or having to take as much resources from the earth in the first place. That's sort of the biggest thing that we can do. It's not necessarily always making just a different alternative to something. It just be as simple as stop using it. Now, granted, people don't like to talk about that part, because then you start hitting people in their pockets, right?
Yeah.
So that's not usually the first conversation people like to have, but it's one of the more important ones, to be honest, when it comes to sustainability.
Yep. And I think as for the reduce thing, you frame it as you can't spend less money. Think about it. If instead of going to the local gas station and buying your coffee and using a disposable cup every day, you can reduce that by making your own coffee and using your reusable coffee mug every day, right? That kind of idea, as far as reduce. because you save money and you reduce the amount of your carbon footprint and pollution that you create as an individual. So
exactly.
There, I'm sounding like an 8th grade science teacher now. You took it out of me.
It's all good. It's in your blood, guys. It's in your blood. You need to do what you're supposed to be doing.
24/7, 365 and 1/4 days a year. In 0.13 seconds or whatever the actual number is. I don't even remember. Funny. All right. Well, now is the time. Well, we're going to play a game because this is Twitch. All right. And for this game, actually, let me go and we're going to switch back over to the other screen here to play our game. And I always try to find some common theme for us to go with. And for this one, I knew one of the only things I knew about Dendrimers was that it was a form of drug delivery. So in that interest, I'm going to be asking you questions about delivery. So I got 3 questions about deliveries, and we're going to see how much you know about this. If you get 2 out of 3 of the questions right, someone in chat will be gifted a sub. Okay, so lucky them, they'll be gifted a sub for this, and we'll see how you do. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I no time like the president.
Okay, so which of the following weird pizza delivery stories really happened? All right, one of these 3 stories actually happened. Was it A, a man received pizzas mysteriously for almost a decade, never knowing who delivered them? Was it B, a Pizza Hut delivery driver commandeered a boat to deliver pizza and wings to the Hudson Athens Lighthouse on an island in the Hudson River? Or C, a Tallahassee, Florida Domino's driver was guilty of eating all of the pepperonis off of 2 pizzas he was delivering?
Well, the last guy sounds like me delivering pizzas. The second person, I hope they got a really nice tip for doing that, if that is true. But I think I'm gonna go with the first one.
And you are right. There's this guy in Belgium, and he received like pizzas for like just over a decade, being delivered all the time at all hours from numerous pizza places, and he never knew who delivered them. Like it
problem to have.
I know it's kind of a. Well, I guess it became so bad. It wasn't just like a pizza; it would be like 10 pizzas. Like,
oh wow!
Yeah, like ridiculous numbers of pizzas. So at first you're like, "Oh, that's great," but one, if you've ever seen like a movie like Super Size Me or something, you know that eating that much of something that bad for you is not a good idea.
You just have a party every day, right? But
exactly.
The
like,
one
all
day
right,
you call a party is the one day no pieces come, right?
Yep. Until it came to be the 2020, and you could no longer have all your friends over to eat the 30 pizzas that were delivered to your house.
Exactly.
All right, question 2. So when a parcel can't be delivered for whatever reason, the courier will often leave a note, all right, and kind of say, why they couldn't be delivered, like, hey, I tried, you weren't home, or various other things. Which one of these reasons was left on the mailbox of someone in Canada? Was it A, too tired, can't keep walking? B, bear at door? Or C, I know you're a Rangers fan?
I know you're a Rangers fan. Interesting. The too tired one doesn't sound like a Canadian. I feel like that's not what they would say. And also, like, you're already there, so why are you tired to deliver?
It could be one of those really long driveways. You ever been to those houses that have like the mailbox at the end of like a 500-meter driveway?
Gotcha.
It could be.
I mean, but you have your delivery truck. So I don't know. I don't know about the first one. Let's see. The Rangers one sounds pretty good. Someone could have a little like flag in front of the door or something, like car or something like that. But I feel like I want the bear one to be true because I just find it hilarious as the bear at the door and you still took the time to write the note. So I'm gonna go with the bear.
And you're right. It is be bear at door. You know, you kind of wonder that. I guess in Canada they have like these large like outside mailbox areas for people where you can like where they get deliveries versus like at your door. So I guess it would work from what I understand of Canada. I don't know if there's any Canadians on the in the chat right now, but that's what I've heard, and I've seen pictures on the internet, so it must be true. But yeah, can you imagine you like to go deliver? Oh, there's a bear there. I imagine it happened with a moose a couple times too in Canada. So can't deliver moose in your yard.
Right, it must be a regular occurrence because otherwise, there's no way I would even gonna know if there's a bear at the door.
All right, well, you've already won. Let's go for 3 though. Let's see if you can get the last one. All right, question 3. Which of the following is on display at the U.S. Postal Museum in Washington, D.C.?
Okay.
Is it A bloody letter that Marilyn Manson sent to a fan that was never delivered due to seepage? B, a taxidermy dog named Oni from 1897 that used to ride mail train cars? Or C, a letter addressed to infamous eugenicist H.H. Laughlin from Hitler in 1939 that was confiscated by authorities before delivery?
I know, right? One Mr. Hamill. I'm surprised USPS has a museum at all. That's true. I agree.
I've been there, so I know the answer because I was there. It's a really good museum.
Really? Where is it?
It's in DC. I don't know how familiar you are with DC. It's a ways out from the regular mall, so you got to take a little trip to get there. But so is it A, the bloody letter, or B, the taxidermy dog, or C, a letter from a eugenicist from Hitler?
Ooh, this is tough. I mean, I guess I've already done that, but I still want my third one.
You already won, so this is just gravy.
I kind of want to go with the taxidermy dog, but I almost want to go with the Hitler one. I'm stuck between those two. Let's do the dog. Let's do the dog.
And you are right. You went 3 for 3. Oni the dog. And which, of course, Oni came from Albany, New York, where, I am from in this area where I live. I'm not from here, but he first got on the rail trains in Albany, New York, and went around the country on rail cars, and he collected pins, and he became the mascot of the Postal Service. And when he passed away, they had him taxidermied, and now he's on display, and you can see him if you go to the museum. So you know to look for him when you go there. So it's a pretty cool story. Way to go. That is incredible. 3 for 3. Amazing. We're all so proud of you here for having been, so amazing at it. So let's gift a sub here to some amazing person. There is a recreational vehicle hall of fame somewhere in Indiana. You need to make an appointment to visit. I just might do that. Maybe I just might do that.
I'm sure they're like really baller RVs out there.
There you go. All right. Kita, enjoy your sub. Thanks for being here today for the stream and tuning into the channel. Awesome. And yeah, good job. 3 for 3. You're amazing. I try to make the questions a little trickier, but I need to make them a little bit harder next time.
I mean, let's just say I'm glad you did not make my exams for grad school. Let's just put it that way.
It helps that there's only 3 choices. Okay, I mean, if there's 3 choices, you got a pretty good percentage chance of getting at least one of them right. Right. So getting the second one right is usually pretty easy. So it helps. And I will say, writing questions is tricky because no matter what you do as a teacher, you'll think you have the best questions ever, and some kid will find a way to misinterpret what you meant. Because
exactly.
And you're just like, what? I never thought that someone else would think the way that this person thought. But then you think about it, and you're like, okay, I guess I can see where they're coming from and how they would misinterpret what I meant to say. And then you feel bad about yourself, and you're like, okay, what the heck did I do? But then you're like, but everyone else got it right. No.
Right. I feel the exact same way. I'm teaching as an adjunct right now at my undergrad institution, and yeah, it's I'm writing quizzes, and I'll get the quiz back, and I'm like, how? Like, what happened? So yeah, I feel that.
Yep. Why did everyone get this wrong? Yep. So I am really excited to see your next episodes and your show. When's the next one gonna drop?
Next one is probably going to be a little while, and the reason for that is I'm trying to finish up my degree right now. So I'm actually writing my dissertation right now. I'll be defending next month. So I'm sort of kind of having to put things on the back burner for a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely will be planning on having things back by the end of April. So yeah.
All right. We are looking forward to that. And now I'm curious, not that I went to the United States Postal Service Museum, all right, which I loved. Mm-hmm. All right. Trevor Benton has been to the Recreational Vehicle Hall of Fame. What kind of interesting museums have you been to? You must have been to a couple, Lumi.
Ooh.
They got some good ones down there in New Orleans. I know they got some good museums.
Yeah, they do. They do. So, of course, the big one is NOMA, which is New Orleans Museum of Modern Art, which they have great exhibits there. But actually, the best museums that I've been to actually haven't been in New Orleans. I guess I haven't been enough of a tourist in my own city. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So the best ones are. There is a good one in New Orleans, the Ogden Museum. It's a great art museum. They have great expos there. They also have little weddings, so great art exhibits at that place too. One of the most peculiar ones is one that I went to. My wife went to Drexel University to get her master's, and so while we're up in Philadelphia, went to a few museums up there. So we went to the I don't remember the names of them, but there is the museum that has the Rocky statue in front of it. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name of it, but there's one that has a Rocky statue in front of it. Great exhibits in there too. But the most peculiar one that we went to up there was a museum about medical history. So sort of really
that's the Mutter Museum.
Sorry, what was that?
The Mutter Museum. Yep. Yes,
that was a great museum that we went to, or at the Mutter Museum. And they have all types of really, crazy abnormalities and different stories about these people who lived with all these different health issues. Let's put it that way. Be nice. But just really really cool stuff. It's sort of a really really great museum for just understanding sort of the progress that we've made in medicine and how we treat certain things. It's really cool to see some of the instruments that we used to use, and then sort of putting your mind, your perspective.
It's disturbing, is what it is. Okay. And you thank the lucky stars. You're like, thank God I'm alive now, and not any time before 1930. Okay.
The only thing you had to help you was a few libations, and that was it. It's sort of
drink this whiskey, and we know Professor Pemberton is trying into his bourbon at the moment, which is
yeah, it was really eye opening and yeah, nightmarish at times. A little bit scary.
Yep, I went to a similar museum in it was one of the surgical museums. It was like in London, and it was in the back upstairs of this like house, and it was like one of those old amphitheater surgeries where they had the table and they would perform the surgery so everyone could watch. So they had all that like set up like back in the old days.
Yeah, there also is there's a bodies exhibit, which a lot of people love to go to. I know they go to Atlanta very often for that one. That's a really popular one. But there was one that I went to that was traveling with the bodies exhibit. Last time I went there, they didn't have it, which I think I went there a year or two ago. But when I went back years ago, they used to have an exhibit that was like sort of simulating your walking around, like, or what life would be like as a blind person, which was really, really interesting. I don't know if you ever had that or anyone in the chat's ever had that experience, but they put you in a room, they give you a walking stick, and then they like slowly dim the lights to the point where it's literally pitch black. You literally cannot see your hand in front of your face. It's so dark in there. And they literally walk you through, and they play sounds on the speakers, and they walk you through different like sets. They should have show you what it's like to be blind. It's a really, really eye-opening experience. It was a lot of fun.
Eye-opening. I see what you did there.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Well, I love the chat going on here. We started the conversation we went off on a tangent on museums, but they're still talking about grading papers. I will add that I finished grading a research paper today, and it was essentially, in the age of COVID, it was if you did something, you passed. That's basically what we do now. And so it was easy to grade on one level. It was, a crying shame on another. Oh, don't thank me. Thank Lumi. He earned that for you. All right. He got that win for you. All right. He won that for use the emotes joyously. But I gave up on crying over papers a long time ago. It wasn't good for my psyche. Yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of my first. I've TA classes before in grad school, but this is like my first real foray into like actually being the person who's like coming up with exam questions and grading them and so on and so forth. And man, it's definitely not nearly as easy as it looks. I think all you teachers out there, you guys carry it with a lot of grace. But yeah, being as a student, you don't realize how much work really goes into it.
Yeah, especially your first couple of years where you're figuring it out and you don't know a lot of like the time-saving ways that you can do things, or how much time it does take. You could have 100 papers and you're like, oh, I got 100 papers. Okay, I'll get through this. And you're just like, you don't realize what it means, and you're like, oh, it took me 5 minutes to grade this paper. How many more do I have? And you do the math in your head and you're like, wait a minute. I got to whittle this down to a minute of paper.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's what you learn your first couple of years. You're like, oh, okay, now I can figure this out.
Yeah, I look at it. I'm like, man, I only have the 2 classes that I teach. I'm looking at other professors who are doing 5, 6, 7, 8 classes, and I'm like, man, I don't understand. It took me a whole week to grade all these lab reports. How are you doing? 100 and some odd students. So yeah,
that's one of the first things I did when we first started doing like online testing. Was like I moved all my like multiple choice questions and everything to online, so I didn't even if they were an essay question, at least I didn't have to drag papers home and back, and risk losing them or anything, so and all the multiple choices graded itself, because for me it was more important to see like what questions they were consistently getting wrong than to give them a grade, if that makes sense. That way I can look at it and be like we were saying, all right, 50% of kids got this question wrong. that was a bad question. You know, you can look at it and be like, oh, they all misinterpreted it this way, or oh, there was really more than one right answer, I guess, you know, versus, oh, I didn't teach that, did I? You know, you can kind of at least look at it, and then you can address that issue versus, you know, I just want to give a grade for it, you know. So, but even if it's an essay, you know, it's always, at least for me, it's easier just to have it on the computer so I could, you know, look at it, you know, either at home or in school and not lose it. Yep.
Yeah.
I like to give at least some useful feedback, but it's usually, I learned this, do it like in Kung Fu. I do martial arts, and like my instructors will always, and I do this in wrestling when I coach wrestling. I tell you one thing to fix. Fix the one thing first. Then I'll give you some other feedback, right? Right. Why would I give you 5 things that need to fix? You're only going to remember one, you know. So I try to like limit my feedback to kids. I can grade an entire paper, but what's the one most important thing you need to do as a student to be a better writer or something? Because they're only usually going to remember one.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when I'm like doing so like I'm teaching organic right now, and for them I try to have some like, you know, more short response questions, because I want to make sure that they're actually understanding the material, you know, and I feel like the best way you can demonstrate that is being able to explain back to me what, you know, why something is what it is, or why A turned to B, or so on and so forth. So it's usually a really good tool to be able to, you know, get that feedback, or to look at it and say, okay, hey, they're struggling with this concept very heavily. So the next time that I have lecture, even if it's on a completely different topic, I'll make sure I set time aside to say, okay, hey, let's walk through this one more time. Let's go through it one more time. Make sure you guys are passionate and pose some more questions.
Yep. And I know that, you know, Gathwiggle, who is also a chemistry professor, she has talked about doing portfolios, you know, with students, and, you know, she's talked about in the TKF Discord as well. I'm doing that with my classes instead of tests as well. But I'll usually always give kids, like, I don't know, I'm in a small city school, so I know the kids really well, and I know their families usually too. And if I see that they got like a question wrong, especially you know, a constructor response or like an essay type question, and they like really didn't understand it, and I'll ask them, I'll be like, so this question, could you talk to me about it? And they'll explain to me verbally the answer. They just couldn't put it in writing for whatever, you know, reason. You know, it couldn't get from their head through their hand out onto, you know, the computer, onto a piece of paper, you know. So you know, so at least I know that they have an understanding of it. And sometimes verbally, you know, kids that have trouble writing, you know, there are those, whether they're, you know, they have dyslexia, or, you know, another you know problem with the writing process and the reading process. So I think that's important, to at least be able to talk to them.
Yeah, something that I wish I had more, especially when I was an undergrad, is just to have more recitation time. You know, like that's something that we have a lot more as graduate students. And a lot of that is actually more organized by the graduate students for us to be able to sort of get in a room. Well, not anymore, but we used to be able to get in the room together and, you know, sort of just have the board up there and just throw up problems, and then have each person go up there and sort of work through the problems and explain to us why it is they're doing what they're doing. And, you know, it really allows you to be able to see, okay, here's someone who actually understands what's going on, and here's someone who's struggling a little bit, and we can sort of, you know, pinpoint what it is they're missing in that. So yeah, it's important to have that kind of feedback, and I wish there was a little bit more of that, at least when I was growing up, baked into coursework.
Yeah, and I think I was the type where I was, in a lot of ways, you know, afraid to ask for help, because I, you know, I had that fear that, you know, you didn't belong, and if you asked for help, you would out yourself, you know, that you had to ask for help. So, you know, and I think, and, you know, the students that are in the chat as well as the professors would agree that, you know, you have your office hours as a professor, and the student that actually goes to it, you know, has an advantage, right? I mean, you could have 100 students, 200 students. You'll have like 1 or 2 kids show up for office hours, but you'll have so many kids struggling, you know, and you're just sitting there going, why is that? Whereas if you're that one of those students that advocates for yourself, you know, then, you know, you're in a much better spot.
Yeah, like you know, there, it's. Mm-hmm. It can be sometimes challenging, I guess, maybe sometimes having the bandwidth to be able to have those sort of times where students are like sort of forced to do that. And, you know, some people may bake it into their courses, and some people may not be able to bake it into the course naturally. So like, you know, when I was in grad school, I had some courses where you just had a set recitation time, and the expectation was that you were coming to that time. This was not during the normal scheduled or registered class time. You know, this was set up on, you know, Friday at 7 p.m. And, you know, hey, bring some food, bring something to drink, and we're going to sit here for the next 2.5 hours, and we're just going to work through problems together. And that was sort of how that was set up. So it was sort of like a mandatory office hours, if you will. But yeah, I found that even with me holding office hours, I find that students don't typically come. And I don't know if it's, you know, I don't know if it's intimidation. I don't know if they're just they feel like they know everything, and they don't realize they don't understand until someone asks them about it. Right. Which I think is a little bit more the case than students want to admit. So it's sometimes difficult to know why that is, but maybe being a little bit more proactive, I guess, on my part to, you know.
Yeah, right. And you know, Mr. Hamill's talking about, you know, sometimes it's hard to turn an abstract concept, you know, into, you know, that thought into words. And so, and it's also, you know, sometimes you're just assumed to be a smart person. And I'll also say it kind of goes into the idea that I went to a talk hosted by Stannis, or I'll put a shout out to my size organization here, for Derek Mueller, who does Veritasium, that YouTube channel, who I'm sure you're familiar with. And, you know, he was talking about how important it is to still have that dialogue and that discussion, especially when it comes to science and thinking about phenomena. And, you know, we kind of got away from that as science educators and students were like, we'll read about it, we'll watch it, we'll, you know, but how often do we actually talk about it as a dialogue? You know, constructing the idea through discussion. I mean, that's how, you know, the ancient Greeks and, you know, Library of Alexandria, all that, you know, they all had this spoken dialogue argumentation. Whereas that's something that you don't see again until grad school. You know, I think it's interesting that, you know, you don't have this argumentation idea as in elementary or middle school or high school. It's not till you get to graduate level that you actually start arguing and talking about ideas. But that shouldn't be the case, right? You should be doing that from a much younger age, you know, using the words in your thinking out loud.
Definitely. I remember when I first started grad school, I was deathly afraid of, you know, like we would have our regular what we call group meetings. And it was basically where we talk about sort of updates on how our research is growing, our different projects. I remember when I first started, I was terrified to ask somebody a question about what they were doing. And, you know, it wasn't until I started getting more accustomed to being in that sort of atmosphere where it's like, it's okay to argue. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to voice that, hey, I don't understand what it is that you're doing. And I don't understand why you do, you know, you're doing this step or you're taking this avenue. And yeah, it wasn't until I got to grad school and, you know, I got into my second, third year that I started to feel more comfortable with actually challenging people on their thoughts, challenging people on like what they're saying. And, you know, not saying that I necessarily disagree with you, but just to, you know, hey, you're not just going to sit up there and tell me. I want to know why. Explain to me. And kind of going back and forth and having those kind of conversations. Yeah, it's something that, you know, maybe it should be something that, you know, sort of trickles down a little bit more. But I think that also comes back with also the devaluing of grades and points in grad school too. Because at least with me teaching, I feel like a lot of students, they're so concerned about not losing points that they, miss the fact that they're here to try to understand something better. They're here to try to learn. So the emphasis is on not losing points rather than actually learning or actually internalizing the material. And sometimes they get so afraid about that they get so focused on that they don't realize that they're sort of missing the forest for the trees. And, I think I've seen a lot of discussion. I have a lot of friends who work in education and have done research in education who are sort of thinking of different ways in which to buck those trends and to maybe take grades out of that. And I know that can sometimes be a little bit contentious for depending on who you're speaking to, but there is a little bit of merit there to maybe take sort of the emphasis on grades that you're so focused on. Why don't we just put that to the side? Let's just worry about learning right now.
Yeah, in non-dairy trio, and you're not even double advocate. I agree. It's like it's one of those things where like we can all agree that it's better to do it one way, but we're stuck with the system that we're in, right? You could have 100 kids in a class. You're not going to be able to have a Socratic seminar necessarily with 100 students, right? You're going to be like, all right, read the chapter in the book. Let's come in and get the lecture, and then you're going to get out of here, right? Because you're very much limited in what you can do. And I know myself, I've been trying to get away from grades and kids focusing on grades and focusing more on learning. You're not just teaching content, you're trying to reteach how a student sees education, and their parents see education. As a professor, even know you'll have parents, call you up and be like, what's up with my kid's grade? Your student evals will rip you apart. Yeah, they could. Some will and some won't. It's interesting I think to think about it. But getting back to the argumentation, kids are good at arguing, right? Because a classic one is they will argue forever about who's going to win, Iron Man or Batman, right? Mm-hmm. And they'll go back and forth about arguing their point, citing evidence and reasoning for their position, right? Or you could take any other characters or which season of Fortnite was better than another, right? And they'll argue endlessly about it. What we want them to do is argue about science that in the same way. That would be nice. Or about what they think should be science, like we're talking about. Argue about paper bags versus plastic. It doesn't. The end result doesn't matter. The fact that you're discussing it and using evidence is what matters.
Exactly. I think from very small children all the way up till undergrad, right? All your feedback is reduced to one single data point, right? It's if you're in kindergarten, it's the color sticker you may have gotten on your little report card when you go home. Was it green? Was it red? Yep. Was it yellow? Those kind of things. But that's your feedback, right? Or when it comes to report cards, right? That letter grade is your feedback, and there's a lot of information that gets lost when you distill all this information we have about this child or student, and we distill it down to a letter, right? it gets a little bit. There's a lot of stuff lost in that process. So. Yeah, it'd be good to get more feedback than just great.
So this quickly devolved into a discussion of pedagogy and teaching.
Yeah.
I always say if you get two teachers together, you can talk for hours. It doesn't matter. Because there is so much depth to what you talk about, and everyone has a teaching experience because everybody's gone to school, and almost everyone's taught something at some point as well. Sure. So. Sure. It's one of those connecting things that we all have in common, for the most part, unless you went to like a Montessori school. If you went to a Montessori school or something, then you have a completely different experience than everyone else. But any other questions, chat? Anyone else got anything for Lumi?
Yeah,
you guys were writing some great stuff there. And unfortunately, we do have the fact that COVID destroyed education. and saved it at the same time. It's kind of a
yeah. I mean, that's the great thing about well, let me say this real quick. That's the great thing about COVID. I think, if you will say there's some sort of silver lining here, if it at least gives us the opportunity to sort of look at systems and the way they work and say, okay, well, maybe there's a way we can change this. Maybe there's a way to make this a little bit better. Take advantage of the opportunity to sort of change things, change the status quo. I know for me, one big thing was, as a graduate student, I felt like there were certain things that were in our program that to me didn't serve the students. They served the faculty. And I felt that, if we were the students and we're forced to hit these certain milestones or requirements, hey, why don't we make it about the students? So, we've been working on things like our seminars, for instance, and saying, okay, hey, why don't we, because most students who leave with a PhD do not continue on into teaching or as a faculty position at a university. Why don't we start bringing in more industry people into our seminars to give us some more career options? We can meet some more people, help us network a little bit better, things like that. And we're actually able to. Actually, our first industry seminar is next week, next Monday. So yeah. Anyways, it's at least been the time to take advantage of changing certain systems and making it a little bit better for us. So non-dairy neutrino, you asked, what is a benchtop? All right, so what we call the little, when you go into a lab, you'll see a series of little tables or areas that we put all our chemicals and glassware on, things like that. We call that a benchtop. So it's sort of our benchtop workspace. The same thing you sometimes even see in like a woodworking shop. You can call that a benchtop, a little table that you're working on. So whatever surface it is that you're working on with your materials, that's what we call a benchtop. So that's what I say. It's me at the benchtop. It's me in my lab space. Me doing experiments, thinking about things, and wondering about things, and then trying to answer those very questions that I have. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, Louie, it is time for Mr. Biter to go to bed.
I'm sure it's late over there.
Good
yeah.
night. Yep.
So almost 11 o'clock.
Yep, and got school tomorrow, of course. Some wonderful stuff, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. We had a great conversation. Thank you, everyone else that's in chat for being here and being so accommodating to our guest. Please check out his YouTube channel. I just shared it out there. It very much appreciated that if you go check that out and give a like on a couple of the videos and subscribe.
Definitely. I'd appreciate it. But hopefully you have a little fun too. If you're going to subscribe, hopefully you have a little fun.
Oh yeah, we always have fun here. I always say to my students, or like when I'm teaching, if I'm not having fun, my students aren't having fun. So if I'm not having fun, on Twitch, you're not having fun either. Right? Then it's like, what are we doing? No one's having any fun. Everyone's just miserable, and that's no fun.
Well, if you ever see one of my videos, you definitely know that I have fun making them.
Exactly, I love it. Right when it comes out like that, that that is awesome. All right, well, we're gonna find someone to raid here for fun. Just like last week, we had Check Me Out was streaming last week, and she's streaming now as well. So we can have our nightly positivity. She's talking about gratitude. So she is a TKF streamer as well. So we'll stop over there and say hello to her as we raid. So everyone, please hang out and say hello to her. Thank you for being here. Next stream will be Friday. Me and Vinny will be back playing some more Subnautica as I try to finish that game, and that'll be fun too. So
awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Have you, Scott.
And have a great night and a great rest of the week. Wednesday over. Woohoo! All right, weekend's going to be upon us sooner than you think. All right, good night, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.